The series opens up on June 21, 2019, in the small German town of Winden, where a man named Michael Conwald hangs himself in his attic art studio. He leaves behind a letter whose envelope reads, "Do not open before November 4th, 10:13 p.m. The letter is later retrieved by his mother, Inez Conwald. Over the next 7 months, Michael's 16-year-old son Jonas Conwald misses school, and then joins a 2-month therapy to deal with his father's passing. During this time, Michael's widow, Hannah Conwald, who has a strained relationship with Inez, continues an affair with Winden Police Department officer Ulrich Nielsen. On November 4, 2019, after waking up from yet another nightmare, Jonas heads to the kitchen to find the electricity has gone out. He calls for his mother, who is secretly having intercourse with Ulrich upstairs. Ulrich, on the other hand, is also cheating on his wife, Katharina Nielsen. Soon afterwards, he leaves through the window and jogs home through the woods. On his way home, he passes a sign pointing to the Winden Caves. Later, an ominous noise is heard from the cave, and a cloaked person emerges from its opening. Later that day, while Jonas rides his bike to therapy, he notices a missing person poster for one of his classmates, Eric Obendorf. During today's session with his therapist, Peter Doppler, Jonas has an angry outburst over why Michael would kill himself without leaving an explanation. Afterwards, he returns to the Winden Comprehensive School for the first time in the past 7 months, but is treated like an outcast. However, his good friend Bardos Tiedemann arrives and shields him from the weird glances of other students. Bardos had bluffed everyone that Jonas was in France for a 2-month school exchange program. At the Nielsen family home, Katharina is serving breakfast while trying to manage her children. Magician Nickel Nielsen won't change out of his magician's outfit. Rebellious Magnus Nielsen can't find his hoodie, and Jonah's love interest Martha Nielsen won't eat because she's on hunger strike. A few minutes later, Ulrich arrives, saying he took so long because there was a line at the bakery because it was the first day of school. He has a quick conversation with Mikkel, who indirectly hints about knowing of his father's extramarital affair. At the Winden police station, Chief Charlotte Doppler is yelled at and spat on by Jurgen and Ulla Obendorf, who criticized the police's lackluster results in the search for their son Eric. It has now been 13 days since he went missing. Ulrich, arriving on time, diffuses the situation and suggests that Eric may have run away, as he has done before. He promises to find their son and sends them home. Later, Ulrich explains that he is confident that Eric ran away because Winden is a sleepy, safe town with almost no criminal activities. But Charlotte reminds him of his brother Mads Nielsen's disappearance, which Ulrich insists was not related to any crime. Charlotte then suggests he should pay his mother, Jonna Nielsen, a visit, as she has called the emergency number again. At the high school, students and teachers assemble in the gym where the principal, Katharina Nielsen, encourages them to talk about Eric's disappearance and not hide their emotions. Later in class, an anxious Martha enters and reveals that she started dating Bardos, much to Jonas's dismay. It is obvious that Jonas and Martha had a budding romance in the past. Meanwhile, from the conversation between Bardos and Jonas, it is revealed that Eric used to supply recreational drugs to everyone in the school. Bardos knows that he used to hide his stash of drugs in the Winden Caves. He then suggests that they should go retrieve the drugs from the caves later that evening. They include Magnus and Martha in their plan, even though the latter is skeptical about the whole thing. At the Wald Hotel Winden, which has no guests due to Eric's disappearance, owner Regina Tiedemann stands at the empty front desk, talking on the phone. On the other side of the call is a personnel from the local bank, asking her to quickly repay her loans. Elsewhere, after flirting with Ulrich on a phone call, Hannah goes back to her work as a massage therapist. She gives the director of the Winden nuclear plant, Alexander Tiedemann, a massage inside his office. He says that the plant's pending closure might be causing his body to be tense. Although not a native to Winden, Alexander has worked and lived in the town for almost 33 years. That evening, Jonas bikes to the forest, where he finds Martha alone, as the others are late. She wants to explain her relationship with Bardos, but he states that she doesn't need to explain anything. Changing the topic, Martha then tells him she is experiencing déjà vu, as though everything has happened before. Jonas jokes that it's a glitch in the Matrix. As the children embark on their journey to Winden Cave, the parents of the town attend a meeting to discuss Eric's disappearance. The meeting is interrupted when Police Chief Charlotte's father-in-law, Helge Doppler, arrives, yelling, "It's going to happen," over and over again. Back in the woods, Magnus arrives with his younger brother Mikkel, followed by Bartosz. When they arrive at the cave, they learn Eric's drugs have already been found by Franziska Doppler, the police chief's daughter. After she and Magnus flirted earlier in the day, she overheard their plans and decided to get there first. While fighting over the drugs, a loud noise emits from the cave, sending everyone running. Jonas freezes and is left behind along with Mikkel. He soon jolts back to attention, grabs Mikkel, and starts running. but he suddenly trips only a few meters ahead. After regaining his balance and collecting himself, he realizes that Mikkel is nowhere to be found. Alone in the woods, Jonas hears someone call his name. He turns and sees a ghostly vision of his father covered in blood or some other dark liquid. Jonas then runs to catch up with his friends waiting on the street where the parents of the town are gathered to find their children. After losing his brother Mads 33 years earlier, Ulrich refuses to lose his son too. He begins a relentless pursuit to find Mikkel, starting with a search around Winden Cave. During all this, the clock has struck 10:13 p.m., meaning it's time for Inez to open the envelope containing her son's final words. She reads and learns the truth about Michael, a truth that Jonas has not yet known about his father. That night, Ulrich, who is a police officer himself, and others from the force are unable to locate Mikkel. However, the next morning, in a search led by Police Chief Charlotte Doppler, a young boy's body is found. Ulrich quickly determines it is not his son Mikkel. But strangely, the body has charred eyes and ears and is dressed as though he stepped out of the 80 seconds. As the search party continues, a stranger watches from a distance. The town of Winden reels from the news of Mikkel's disappearance and the discovery of a body. Meanwhile, the other missing boy, Eric, is alive. He is held captive in a strange windowless room containing a device that looks really similar to an electric chair. Eric is strapped into the chair and metal clasps are placed in front of his eyes before the machine is activated. At the Conwald home, Jonas has a nightmare where his ear is leaking a black substance, and his father's spirit appears. After the dead boy with charred eyes and dressed in 1980s clothing was discovered, the body was sent to the Winden police station to be inspected by the pathologist Etta Hyman. During this time, Ulrich Nielsen navigates the Winden caves to continue his search for Mikkel. Eventually, he finds a sealed metal door constructed by the Winden nuclear power plant. Later, after Charlotte Doppler presents the evidence found on the unidentified dead boy to her officers, Ulrich privately explains his discovery to her. He theorizes that Mikkel has somehow accessed the grounds of the power plant. Although Charlotte is doubtful, Ulrich convinces her to request a search warrant, adding that all 3 Winden missing person cases that occurred over the years are somehow connected. At Ulrich's mother, Jonna Nielsen's apartment, her husband Trant struggles to wipe blood off his sweater before Jonna enters, unaware. She quizzes Trant about his whereabouts from last night, and he claims that he had gone to the gas station before he can join a search party. Jonna concludes that Mikkel's disappearance has parallels with Mads. Meanwhile, the stranger with the briefcase arrives at the Wald Hotel Winden, asking the nervous Regina Tiedemann for a room. He settles himself in his room by pinning and taping many pictures, drawings, notes, and diagrams on every wall. He also owns a book called A Journey Through Time by H.G. Tannhaus. He then opens his briefcase and takes out a complex brass device. The next day, Charlotte sends Ulrich a voice message that Alexander has rejected the warrant. Hannah Conwald tries to call Ulrich, but he doesn't accept the call as he is too upset to handle anything else. Meanwhile, Jonna visits Mads' grave near the Winden St. Christopher's Church, placing one of his old toys on his tombstone. In the Conwald home, Jonas comes across a hidden intricate map of the caves in Michael's attic, with a note saying, "Where is the crossing?" A few days later, Ulrich and Alexander argue from opposite sides of the power plant's gate. Alexander points out that Mikkel wouldn't be able to gain access to the heavily patrolled section of the caves, provoking an emotionally driven Ulrich to berate Alexander and threaten that he'll return with a search warrant. Hannah approaches him upon arriving at the police station, and when they start kissing in the storage room, Ulrich turns her down due to current circumstances. He searches through evidence and finds out that Jurgen Obendorf, an employee at the power plant, and Eric Obendorf's father had driven his van near the power plant on the night of Eric's disappearance. That night, Ulrich trespasses into the Jurgen Obendorf's junkyard, where he finds a hidden sack of drugs. Jurgen, who is armed, finds Ulrich and confesses that he and Eric were selling them at the Winden Comprehensive School. Ulrich dismisses the confession and asks him if he was at the power plant the day before, which he denies. In the decorative torture room, a cloaked kidnapper is restraining Eric onto the electric chair. On the old-fashioned television, H.G. Tannhaus is asking about the possibility of ever seeing what lies behind a black hole, and how far scientists would go. Later, an incident costs Eric his life, burning his eyes in a similar fashion to the dead boy. The cloaked kidnapper drags his corpse through the Winden forest at night. While the Conwald house is blacked out, Jonas asks Hannah if she thinks Michael was keeping secrets from them. Hannah admits that she does think so, further adding that he never revealed his true self. At her apartment, Jonna witnesses Trant sneaking out of the house late at night. Meanwhile, Alexander's men are transferring large items into a truck when he hears a roar from the caves. Suddenly, lights flicker everywhere in Winden. Throughout this, Charlotte goes outside the station and catches a glimpse of a swarm of dead birds lying around the car park. although it is not explained how the incident appears to be connected to the flickering lights. Just then, the stranger pastes a newspaper article saying "Where is Mikkel?" on his wall. He then crosses out the where and writes when. Meanwhile, in a different timeline, a scarred and filthy Mikkel limps out of the Winden caves and notices a slightly different atmosphere outside. He arrives back at his home and stares at the different scenery. He tries to open the door, but it is answered by a teenage Ulrich Nielsen, who calls him a fool. He witnesses Ulrich riding on a motorcycle with teenage Katharina Albers. Confused, Mikkel then notices a newspaper with the lead story about the Chernobyl disaster. To his surprise, the date on the article is November 5, 1986. The confused Mikkel then enters the Nielsen family home, further noticing the difference in the ambience. He encounters a younger grieving Jonna Nielsen, his grandmother, who initially thinks he is Mads. When she realizes it is not her son, she kneels in front of him, asking if he knows where Mads is. Scared, Mikkel sprints out, leaving her to cry on the floor. A month after Mads Nielsen's disappearance, his missing poster is plastered all over Winden. The Winden police is criticized for lacking proper conclusions from their searches. The elderly chief investigator Egon Tiedemann receives a call from a local farmer Herman Albers, reporting that 33 of his sheep mysteriously dropped dead. Meanwhile, Claudia Tiedemann, Egon's daughter, is preparing for her first day as the new and first female director of the Winden nuclear power plant. As she drives her depressed daughter, Regina, to Winden Comprehensive School, Claudia brags about her new position and chastises Regina for not seemingly caring about her appearance. Similarly, Mikkel arrives at the high school where he meets the younger Hannah, conversing with younger Katharina and another girl about music. He asks for help to look for his mother, Katharina, but Katharina, being a jock, trolls Mikkel and shoves him aside. On the other end of the town, Claudia shows up at the nuclear power plant, where Helge Doppler, her old friend and a security guard, hands her the book A Journey Through Time by H.G. Tannhaus as a present. She is then introduced to her secretary Jasmine Truin, who gives her the plant's figures and informs her that the journalist Trond Nielsen intends to interview her. However, he is secretly there to beg her to continue their affair, which she refuses. After inspecting the field of dead sheep, Egon makes a file for that case. Soon afterwards, Mikkel arrives in his office and asks to look for his father, Ulrich Nielsen, whom Egon despises for his rebellious nature. Noticing his scratches, Egon speculates that Ulrich battered the boy. Slowly, Mikkel finally starts to piece everything together, and understands that he traveled back in time. On the other hand, Egon heads out to threaten Ulrich after calling the hospital. Later, Nurse Inez Conwald picks Mikkel up, but he refuses to give his identity since he is upset about the situation. Egon arrives at the Nielsen family home, where loud metal music can be heard even from the outside. He confronts Ulrich in his bedroom and then suspects him of murdering Herman Albers' sheep. Confused and enraged, Ulrich responds by rebuking him for his alcoholism, and saying that Mads would have already been found if it wasn't for it. With his ego hurt, Egon returns to the Winden police station to observe the autopsy of a dead sheep. The veterinarian confirms that they all seemingly died of cardiac arrest, which intrigues Egon. At the power plant, Claudia defies the retiring director and Helge's father, Bernd Doppler, for keeping secrets. Only recently, she discovered a mysterious record of an incident that occurred 3 months ago and was covered up. Bernd explains that ever since the Chernobyl disaster, he wanted to maintain the Winden nuclear power plant's positive reputation since everyone's lives depends on it. If they were to be blacklisted because of the incident, the town would lose their most reliable earning source. Despite this, Claudia is determined to know everything about the plant. Hence, Bernd directs her to their section of the Winden caves. She then starts venturing into the caves and is shocked to find dozens of large yellow barrels containing toxic waste deep inside. Elsewhere, Mikkel stays at the hospital until nighttime, with Inez comforting him as he cries throughout the day. He refuses to speak or even reveal his situation since it is far-fetched. He admits that he comes from the future, much to Inez's disbelief. Suddenly, there is a roar from the caves, followed by flickering lights all over town, and a storm of dead birds. While the nurses are distracted, Mikkel escapes his ward through a window, and dashes to the caves since it could be his only chance to return to his present. Meanwhile, Hannah and Ulrich converse with each other about the strange happenings in their town. Hannah asks him what he would wish for if the world would end soon, and he answers, a world without Winden. Eventually, the strange flickering of light stops. Back on the night of November 5, 2019, Ulrich sets out to the steel door in the caves and tries to force it open with a crowbar. In 1986, Mikkel slips down a slope and breaks his leg. Through the unseen passage, he overhears Ulrich from 33 years into the future, banging the door with his crowbar, so he shouts for help. Ulrich can hear Mikkel's faint voice, but their attempts to reach the other are futile. Though separated in time, 1986 and 2019 are connected. They stumble out of the caves in their respective years. Meanwhile, in H.G. Tannhaus' clock shop, the elderly H.G. Tannhaus is finishing a complex brass device, the same one the stranger has in 2019. On November 6, 2019, at the Doppler family home, Charlotte and Peter Doppler emerge from their separate bedrooms. A furious Franziska accuses her snide 8-year-old deaf sister, Elizabeth, of stealing her lipstick. They have a lukewarm relationship since, despite caring for each other, Elizabeth enjoys causing mischief toward Franziska. Unlike most people, Elizabeth views Mikkel Nielsen as a show-off and is not bothered by his disappearance. Meanwhile, Jonas Conwald continues studying the Winden Cave map he found in his father's studio, and puts it in his backpack. He heads out to the caves to see what Michael was searching for, unaware that the stranger is spying on him. Elsewhere, Peter visits his father, Helge Doppler, who has dementia and lives in the Winden rest home. Helge keeps muttering that he has to tell someone that something has to stop, much to Peter's confusion and dismay. He also tends to have a habit of chanting tick-tock. Meanwhile, Charlotte is driving Elizabeth to the Winden School for the Deaf. On the way, Charlotte notices a wildlife camera on the roadside and takes the memory card from it, which Elizabeth considers stealing. Upon arriving at school, Elizabeth interacts with her boyfriend, Yasin Fries. Franziska is sitting through her German literature class until Magnus Nielsen storms in. Even though it isn't his class, Franziska can tell he is following her, so she checks the time and claims she needs to go to the bathroom. Magnus immediately follows her when she leaves, stealthily pursuing her outside the Winden Comprehensive School. She goes through the forest, where she unburies a box from a railroad and obtains an envelope from inside. Meanwhile, at the Winden police station, Charlotte observes the autopsy of one of the dead birds from November 5, 2019. The pathologist, Etta Hyman, explains to Charlotte the abnormal physical features of the birds that appeared when they died. Charlotte reveals that she saw these features 33 years ago too. She can tell this is a historical recurrence, and the current mysteries are connected, but she can't figure out how. In her office, Charlotte loads the memory card she has taken from the wildlife observation camera, and checks for files from around the time of Mikkel's disappearance between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. She sees Peter's Volvo caught on camera at 9:30 and prints the screenshot. In the video, Peter tries to wipe grains of red soil off his car mat, the same found on the dead boy on November 4, 2019. Charlotte then calls him and questions him about what he wanted to say to her on the morning after Mikkel disappeared, and where he was that night. The nervous Peter responds with lies that Charlotte can perceive through. Charlotte later drives to a trailer where Benny, a transgender prostitute, and Peter's known affair, resides. She denies that Peter had visited her on that night. After a fruitless exploration of the caves, Jonas decides to leave and finds a red knot tied around the handle of his bike, which presumably was placed there by the stranger, without his knowledge. At the rest home, Helge chants, "The beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning," until he overhears gossip about the dead boy with charred eyes. This prompts him to sneak out and wander the forest. At the comprehensive school, Franziska is confronted by Magnus. He cites that she's a drug dealer since her envelope is a cash packet, and Franziska bemoans about how she wants to leave Winden due to the number of liars and people with secrets, including her parents. As a matter of fact, Peter was discovered to be homosexual, straining his marriage with Charlotte, yet they refused to divorce. After Franziska spills her heart out, she and Magnus kiss and have sexual intercourse in the locker room. Charlotte then heads up to the Doppler family hunting cabin, where she finds tire tracks caked in red dirt. She gets a call from pathologist Etta, reporting that the birds also have burst eardrums. Furthermore, the white spots on their feathers are genetic mutations first documented after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Following this, Charlotte enters the rotten bunker, where the underground room is murky with pipes and a bench sported by rusty lights. She receives a call from Alexander Tiedemann, disclosing that Ulrich Nielsen jumped the Winden nuclear power plant fences to investigate. Meanwhile, Elizabeth has finished her classes for the day and waits for her parents to pick her up. After using her sister's lipstick, which she earlier stole, she strolls off. Charlotte picks up a scarred Ulrich from the power plant, and on the way, he complains that his son is gone and that he is being punished. He expresses hatred over the fact that he is receiving sympathy, but no help for his search, and that's because Mikkel isn't their child. Ulrich defiantly demands Charlotte drop him off in the pouring rain, and she relents. Just then, she receives a call from a panicked Peter, who apprises that Elizabeth wasn't waiting at school, and that her classes finished early. Through the forest road, she stops and finds Elizabeth's knit fox cap astray on the ground. Hence, she returns home and laments with Peter, fearing for the worst. She sends out the Winden police in search of Elizabeth. Fortunately, after several hours, Elizabeth returns home, much to the Doppler family's relief. Elizabeth, in sign language, communicates that on the way home, she met a man named Noah, who gave her a gold pocket watch that apparently used to belong to Charlotte. Surprised, Charlotte opens the pocket watch and finds an engraving for Charlotte. Just then, Peter receives a call from a police officer, who informs him that he found Helge in the woods. At the next day's dawn, the stranger sneaks into the Conwald family home. He goes into Jonah's bedroom while the teenager is asleep. There, he takes out the map that Jonah's found a few days ago, and writes something on it before returning it. Meanwhile, in the final scene, Helge wakes up in the nursing home and sees Nurse Clara Schrage. He insists that he has to stop Noah, much to the nurse's confusion. In the forest, Yasin walks to school alone and stumbles upon the cloaked kidnapper, who reveals that he's been sent by Noah. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.